Yeah.
Yeah.
So
next session?
Next session.
Next session.
Yes. So this one, I like to talk money. So we certainly want to make sure that we touch on this subject. ROI is always a huge conversation. It's typically a conversation that stakeholders want to have, they need to have, and they always ask, like, I always think of that game, like, show me the money.
Yes.
So this is the session for you, especially because this is going to teach you how to calculate ROI for digital signage. We're going to have a stacked panel that's going to be addressing this. And truly, every digital signage deployment has the capability to accommodate advertising. And so we're going to dig into that, and almost always having an ad revenue model can accelerate adoption and scalability of a digital signage network. And in fact, you can potentially pay for deployment of many signage networks from the ad revenue as well. So sometimes, immediately and sometimes over time. So how do you calculate all of this, and how can you use this data to help generate a digital signage network ROI for your client? And this session will address both the models of a digital signage network's ROI, purpose built and using an ad revenue model.
Yep.
And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it to our moderator, Paul Fleuranges. Did I say that right? He is the DSF board and executive committee member. Can you hear me, Paul?
Yes, I'm here. I can hear you.
Perfect. All righty. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to you so you can pull in our wonderful panelists and take this one away.
Great. Thank you, ladies. So this afternoon, myself, Paul Fleuranges, DSF board member, is going to be talking to you with my colleagues, Stephanie Gutnik, who is head of digital transformation at Outfront Media, and also my good friend Chris Freeman, who's former principal architect for audiovisual technology at United Airlines. We're going to talk to you about ROI, but I think, guys, ROI by itself doesn't really matter. I think it's about ROI or ROO. So I'll put it to you, Steph. Does it matter which metric you use to justify your digital signage deployment, and why?
I think it totally depends, first and foremost, if it's an ad-based model or not. And really, though, regardless of the type of model, ROI and ROO fall into the category of three-letter acronyms that I think everybody loves to hate. And so it's just really getting down to what is the purpose of this network? Why are we building it? And whether it's investment or objective, to answer your question more head on, it really is, how are we going to respond to the goal of this, and what's the plan to get there? So ROI, ROO doesn't matter, depending on really making sure that you set a goal and there's a plan to get there.
Chris, same question to you. Now, you're coming at it from a different perspective. Steph is in the ad world and ad tech world. When you were at United Airlines and what you're currently doing now, you were doing more customer-facing information, day-to-day stuff. Do you agree with her opinion on that, or do you have a different opinion on it?
I agree with her opinion, especially from a transportation side. It has more to do with the ROO, especially being in an airport. You can't always run ads as an airline because you have to revenue share that with the airport authority. So we're really looking at how does it display our brand and what information are we getting to the customer. So we're looking more at the ROO side of it than the ROI. Because it's going to be harder for an airline. Once you're in the terminal area, that concrete space that you go from gate, the airport owns that. The airlines own the carpeted area that you're waiting for your aircraft. Mm-hmm. So
but who owns
everything on the outside?
My question really is who owns ROO or ROI, whichever one you're going to use. Who owns that on that team? Who's responsible for that? Now, Chris, I'll start with you, and then I'll see what Steph has to say.
For us, it's the entire stakeholders. So it'd be IT, who's going to be providing the hardware and the services, to our branding group, who's now owning what's going on the sign, and then the airport group of what they want displayed. So we try to share it as a entire team approach to it.
Steph, you agree?
Yeah, I think all players have a role in whether or not there's success in the network, as well as coming from an ad perspective, the campaign. So on the side of the publisher, the media owner, there's the expectation that the team is going to be putting screens in areas that have a high opportunity to see. So first of all, making sure the screens are visible, it's a pleasant experience, it's in a situation where people are open to being engaged with and receive a message and be in the right mindset to process that in a way that leads to some action. And then on behalf of the client, I've had many experiences, one with actually a friend from undergrad who works for a very big brand, did a test in out of home and didn't really set the necessary KPIs, another 3-letter acronym for key performance indicator, to measure the success of the campaign. They were not conducive to out of home. So the brand was ready to write off out of home as something that just didn't work for their brand's needs, when really after having a conversation about it post-mortem, it was just totally the wrong execution, and best practices from everything from media spend to creative weren't followed. So again, it's really up to the client, making sure that whether this is a brand communicating directly with the media owner or through an agency, that everybody is very clear on their expectations. And that's usually when the media owner's sales team and strategy team can come in and say, okay, based on what you want to do here, this is how we can help. This is where out of home can assist. And you know what? Like if you're looking for certain metrics in terms of attribution that out of home might not deliver on, like a click-through rate or something, like let's not even go there. So it's just setting expectations and communicating on all sides to ensure that everybody's happy at the end of the day.
You bring me to my next question, which is who helps, or how do you best define that metric? Is it project based? Is it where it is? Because you're talking about advertising, Chris is talking more about place based information. So I'll throw it to either one of you. How do you choose the best metric, and what goes into choosing that metric? Anyone?
I'll start with that. So for us, it's going to be project based or location based. Are we communicating with external customers or the internal customers? Going back to their leadership of exactly what they wanted to communicate and then getting the response back. A lot of times with the end users, they always said, let's go ask our external customers what they want on the screen. Well, they go, it's based on what sporting event was there. It was more TV that they wanted versus the information. So we have a tendency to leave out our external customers and just deal with the people in the airports. Are they getting less questions? How does the sign keep people from having to go ask that really easy question to letting them deal with, how can I help you maybe get to another flight?
Steph, on the ad side, how is that metric defined? Because it's all about that goal, right? As you know, from the campaign side, right? What they want to achieve and how you can help them.
Definitely. And there's a lot of myth busting too that's been our job, at the DSF and at Outfront and just in the community about what out of home can and cannot do. Out of home being a one-to-many broadcast medium is usually considered for upper funnel metrics. And when the funnel, we talk about the sales funnel with getting consumers to do certain things along their path to purchase. And so upper funnel is the brand awareness type area where it's really just considered broad messaging, which out of home does extremely well. A lot of the KPIs, again, of clients, even who come in, who are usually spending money in other media like digital, they come in and say, hey, we just want to attain reach. We want to reach X many people or what have you across these markets with this message to raise brand awareness. And to them, that's a success. If they do this, that's great. And then there's some means of attribution that we can apply to that to make sure that they do their job. So surveys are very popular, especially with mobile apps these days, to understand how that worked, if there was a brand awareness lift. But then as we move down the funnel, that's where we can start looking at consideration, intent to purchase, and actual sales. And look, like data and privacy is a very big conversation, maybe best suited for another discussion, but certainly we can dig into it a little bit here in that, it used to be several years ago that buyers of most types of media would ignore out of home because we were not able to incorporate cookies in how we looked at attribution. Cookies being like those third-party tidbits of information as to what consumers are doing online, and did they make a sale? And then that last click, wherever they came from before that sale, would kind of get all of the credit for the success of this campaign, which we know is flawed. It's like giving credit to a soccer player who scored the final goal in a game. It took the entire team to get there, not just the last person who did it. Which is my sports analogy for someone who's not athletic. So anyways, where I'm getting with that is there's just a lot of new ways to show and demonstrate that out-of-home is effective at any level of the consumer funnel, and is doing so in a way where, because again, one-to-many, we don't have cookies. That used to be an issue. It's not anymore because third-party cookies are being eliminated along with the Apple IDFA and identifiers. So out-of-home is in a really good place, regardless of where the marketer is at in terms of how they're thinking about where out-of-home should fit in an omni-channel campaign.
And Chris, Stephanie's talking about advertising. You and I were both in the information business in transit. When you start laying out that project, because you were an architect of technology, when did you start thinking about what metric I have to hit in order to meet that stakeholder definition for either return on investment or return on objective? When did you start that? And when should people who are watching this, who are integrators, start thinking about that as they talk to their clients about whether or not this project's going to be a success?
From us, it's always right at the beginning. That is from day one, first minute, is we're looking at that metric, because whatever we're choosing, whatever we're going to be doing, we need to be focused on that goal. And then with today's technology, having more capabilities of how do we identify it. Recently, early this year, we ran a pilot in Cleveland of putting anonymous cameras and using APIs to collect data at Cleveland's airport at 2 gates of identifying, what are people looking at? What attracts them? Is it screen colors? Is it, the screen flashes from a dark color to a bright color, vice versa? What is going to catch their attention and hold their attention? Especially just as we're beginning with the whole COVID, and how do we load aircraft faster, better? How do we queue people up instead of everybody just kind of pushing up towards the gate? So that became focus from the very beginning of how to do that.
And do you find, though, that technology kind of gets in the way of you trying to define what your success is going to be? Because there are a lot of bells and whistles out there. And people who are just getting into digital signage are usually drawn by like the bright, shiny object as opposed to focusing on what their objectives are from the beginning. Do you think technology gets in the way of ROI and ROO, or whichever one you want to use?
I think it does, because everybody keeps seeing that flashing light, the shiny new object. And as you're trying to build this, somebody sees, is at a store and see something else, and they're like, oh, can we do that? Can we add a flashing light? Can we add projectors? Can we put, the LED lights around the outside of the screen to light it up even more? So I think a lot of times the technology, especially nowadays, it's becoming so fast and furious. It changes so often that you're starting a project, you define your goals, and all of a sudden, basically the squirrel happens and people loses attention, and you got to refocus their attention back and say, we started this project. Let's make that new technology, phase 2 or phase 3. Let's think about that as we progress. Let's get the initial project out. Let's focus on our, and once we accomplish that, then we can add in the additional features.
Steph, how important are milestones when you're going about that project on the out-of-home advertising side, as far as your path to either determining if it was a success or you didn't meet your mark? How important are those milestones, and when do you start setting those milestones, or do you see people trying to move the goalpost as the campaign moves forward? Because now you have all this technology, you can, programmatic, you can insert when you want to, you can change the creative easily. How do you control that as you're trying to set milestones, or do you even bother to set milestones these days?
That is such a good question, Paul. And I'm happy you asked it, because first and foremost, just to echo what Chris said, like the tech for tech's sake that we can see sometimes in this industry, we have to be very careful in terms of, again, what is actually going to drive success and return on investment or objective versus what is going to actually take away from the goals here. So that's one. And look, both consumers and media owners can fall victim to investing too much or too little in ever-changing technology, so that we have to be careful with that. But in terms of milestones, again, very interesting to look at, given that 10 years ago, digital signs in the out-of-home environment were very much the exception to the norm. Everybody was used to their printed static signs, and there was a lot of talk in the industry about how converting to digital might, cannibalize revenue coming over, which, as we've seen by splitting the share of voice on a single panel, amongst many other creative opportunities with digital and the like, it's only increased revenue and attracted new types of buyers and budget. So that's been good. But when it was static only, buyers came to out of home for a set flight time. So typically, it's a 4-week flight time that the campaign is going to run, and they have their creative out there and it's printed so it doesn't change. And that's just the way that out of home worked. And now we can certainly set different types of milestones because of not only digital, but programmatic, where a flight time can be as short or as long as the advertiser desires. And they could anticipate that the flight is going to be a week and then extend it to 2 months because things are going so well, or because they really need to push some supply in different markets. Or alternatively, it might be that it was intended that it was going to be a month, but for whatever reason, it was paused or shortened. And with people who are hands to keyboard now, which just means these ad ops teams, both on the publisher and the client side, we're really able to glean those real-time insights as to how a campaign is pacing. So what does the playback look like? And are there markets that are underperforming? We should throw more attention and budget at screens in those markets, boost the activity there. On the contrary, if there are markets that are either playing these ads too quickly, we can slow that down. So the out-of-home space has become very flexible, which is a word that probably hasn't been associated with it for too long. And even in direct campaigns right now, media owners are understanding that clients are just demanding more flexibility based on, to your point, these milestones that are now being set. So it's become a much more, for lack of a better word, real-time and nimble approach and experience for spenders.
Chris, when we talk about digital signage, we talk about planning, we talk about objective, defining your plan, picking your technology, whatever, your content management system, your hardware. At what point does total cost of ownership play a role in determining this, whether or not this outcome was a success, whether it's return on investment or return on objective? At what point does total cost of ownership play into that?
For us, it depends on what side of the house you're on. Were you on the user customer interaction side, or are you on the financial side? Financial, they want to see how that dollar is being spent and how fast they can get the return on investment over the next 5 years. For us, with the customers, is once we're putting it out there, how fast are customers adopting to it. We do a lot of focus groups. We hired a lot of interns to sit there now and kind of just watch people versus actually interviewing people, because interviews, you get one answer from a way you just watch somebody interact with it. And I think the big thing is what we learned in Cleveland too, was that, especially with the new apps that have come out, and United just recently announced a new one where you can talk to a virtual agent, is everybody always thought that signs were going to go away in the airports. Everybody's got a mobile device. We're not going to have signage. And now what they're finding out is people are on the phone. They're talking to either their loved ones or to a United agent on the phone. They want to be able to look up quickly, get the information without having to stop what they're doing, flip an app, and then go back. So we're looking at almost immediate returns on that and that total cost of ownership. Did we make a good choice, and is it helping the customer, both internal and external? Are we taking the customer away from the employee of having to ask, oh, what gate is my flight at, or what time is my flight, and allowing them to focus on more of the concerns of, my flight was canceled, how do I get rebooked, and that type of stuff. So you're freeing up the agent to have more interactions and better interactions with the customer versus just sitting there and being the so-called shell answer man of just answering questions just for the sake of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Chris,
Steph, with you guys, yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No,
I was
go
just
ahead.
going to build
No, go
on
ahead.
this point there. With regards to like the whole digital signage is dead, long live digital signage discussion, it's like, what's the purpose of one medium when others are coming into effect? So mobile is a huge example of that, and just digital in general. Again, a couple of years ago, everybody was after, I'll use Barry Fry's analogy, like that left-handed vegan golfer. That's how particular and granular we could get with this cookie level information in terms of marketers trying to reach very specific target audiences. But that totally neglects the fact that there are other types of consumers who could be interested in a product or service that don't necessarily fall into that key, desired demographic. Word of mouth is huge. If my mom is going to recommend a product that she saw, I will take her advice, and she might not have been the designated audience, but her word to me actually, means more than an ad. So there was a term that was used a lot. It still is, but it's called wastage. Like, how much money did you spend on a campaign that was wasted because it didn't reach the exact audience? And so right now we're in a place where that desire is shifting. Again, some is by necessity because there are privacy laws and tech changes in place where cookies are going away, and speaking to one person individually is just not going to be the case. And that's great for out of home, because how many presentations has everybody on this call seen where somebody opens with that scene from Minority Report where like screens are addressing someone by their name and recommending, what they're running low of. And that's just not the future of our industry. Instead, screens are showing that they are very valuable regardless, because they can deliver a collective message to a group of people. And a lot of us can bond over TV commercials and jingles that we were exposed to when we were younger. It's something that, brings us closer together, and it's a huge sign of the effectiveness of an ad. And as TV viewership declines, as CTV becomes more prominent yet fragmented, out of home is arguably like the last frontier for delivering these broad communications that can bring people together. And certainly, the pandemic was an example of that with PSAs and the like. It was a means of getting a message out quickly and efficiently to large groups of people where targeting just, wasn't a thing. Most people should be wearing masks when they can.
Mm-hmm.
For example.
So in the time we have left, we have about 5 or 6 minutes left. what do you think the main takeaway should be of someone who's watching this conversation amongst the three of us who've been in the industry for a while? These might be new people who aren't into digital signage or digital advertising. What should the main takeaway be around this concept of return on, whether that's objective or investment? To me, they're kind of the same, but what should the main takeaway be? I'll let you go first, Chris.
I think for me, it's not always about the hard dollar you're going to spend. What is the objective, and did you meet that objective? And you have to look at it from a different perspective, especially when you're in a transportation industry. Of it's not always what was the best for the airline or the bus service or whatever the transportation mode is, but is it good for the customer? Did it give them the information that they needed at that point in time?
Mm-hmm. And Steph, is it about getting that right, that contextual message in front of that viewer? Is that what the return on investment or objective is for the out-of-home industry as far as converting to digital? Is that what it's about? And helping those digital marketers online go to digital?
If I was to take away, it largely is just that things are changing so quickly, be it from creative capabilities in the space to targeting and measurement options. And everybody should just be asking questions. Like, that's why the DSF is around. We encourage membership to ask questions of us and one another, regardless of somebody's stage in the industry. They're going to be able to get in touch with people who know more than them. And that's a good thing. Like, that's why we're all here, is to just share what we've experienced so that future campaigns can, be a success. And just because there's maybe an easier ability to start buying now in digital out of home, thanks to programmatic platforms and the like, doesn't mean that the campaign is inherently going to work as an advertiser had expected it to. So asking questions before spending money is the biggest piece of advice I can recommend.
And on that, I'll just give a shameless plug for the DSF. Both Chris and I are on the education committee. And, we have about 30 online courses about everything that has to do with digital signage. I can tell you that our former chairman, Rich Ventura, is working on a class right now about return on objective and return on investment, which we hope to have online in the early part of 2021. And Rich will go into heavy detail. If you've ever taken a course with Rich at any conference, Rich gets into the details very, very deeply. So I'm going to turn it back over to the ladies in the studio because we have about 4 minutes left, and I want to make time for if there are any questions from the audience. So ladies?
Sounds good. Yeah, I do have a couple of questions, if that is okay. I've got y'all for, I think, like 4 more minutes, so I'm going to use the time best I can. So for someone new who is looking to have an idea of what advertising rates might be feasible for his area, are there online references or strategies for what's realistic to charge to you guys?
If the media owner is working with a supply side platform or SSP partner, they can typically make recommendations based on the markets that the supply is in, as well as their vertical. There are certain rates, or CPMs, which is cost per thousand, that would fly for digital billboards, are different than spectacular screens in Times Square, which are different than screens that can play video, for example, because video can come from OTT or TV. So it's a long way to say, get in touch with your partners and they'll be able to advise.
And I just dovetail on what Steph said. I think having your screen measured so that you know what the value of your screen is, how many people are going by your screen, no matter where it is crucially important. So if you're not measured, if you're not like part of GeoPath or have another source of data, you're not going to make sure that you get the best price. I think Steph and I can both agree on that one.
Definitely. Third-party audited measurement is crucial. You can't really do it without it.
Got you. I will say, Paul, every time you say Steph, I think you're talking to me, and I'm like,
I'm sorry, Steph. I'll say Stephanie from now on. I'm sorry, Steph. I'm sorry, Steph.
No, I love it. I am so happy that there's another Steph. But every time I've like been listening, but I've been like typing, and then you're like, and yeah, and Steph, and I'm like, oh no, I'm live. But next question. So Chris mentioned this briefly, but where is the line between technology and ROO and ROI? So he talked about how, you know, a lot of times ROO and ROI are more important, but where exactly do we draw the line at what's more important here?
I think it's really a blurred line, and it's kind of almost a wavy line where you're constantly going back and forth across it. I think it's where your final objective is and what you're trying to accomplish is which side are you going to go on, or are you going to kind of intermingle them? For an airline, it's kind of one of the blurred things. You're trying to figure out the ROI for the executives and the financial side. But for my internal customers and my external customers, I'm more on the RO side. So you're kind of walking both sides of it and trying to make sure that, from at least my grouping, was who are you trying to please more? And for us, it's always going to be our external customers.
Right.
Yeah, I'd agree with Chris. It's,
So,
rolling out.
oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I said I agree. As someone who rolled out a digital signage network in transportation, and from the communication side, for me, it was always about, was the customer getting the communication they needed at that point of transit decision making? That was most important to me. And so while it might not have been financially a return on investment, that return on objective, so that customer had the right information so they could get where they wanted to go. At the end of the day, as we say in transportation, you're only as good as your last rush hour. And if you can use digital signage to help that customer through that rush hour and have the best outcome, you're having a good rush hour and you're not going to get that complaint.
Yeah. So my final question for you guys comes from our viewer who said, in other industries, ROI is a little more measurable. And he said, software as a service and real estate, those were the two he gave as examples. So what do you say to those show me the money types who might be looking to advertise via digital signage, but are used to those other industries?
If it's from a client perspective, I mean, there's been a proliferation of attribution options over the past year or two. So I just suggest that they ask for what they can do to measure, and there will be a solution.
Awesome. Well,
True.
great.
There are enough ways to measure the effectiveness. I said there are enough ways now to measure the effectiveness of digital signage that were not available 3 years ago. When I got into this business, it was not available. Now we have ways to measure attribution, whether it's using cameras on screens or using mobile attribution as far as where people were going. If someone who saw a particular message took up the action that message was prescribing, you can do all that. Whether it's geolocating where this phone was versus that screen, and did they go to that location? There are ways to do it now. So there is a way to measure that ROI if that's what they're looking for specifically, without a doubt, with digital signage.
Yeah, no, agreed. Well, thank you guys so much. I'm going to move us on to our next session, but I think this was very valuable. People had a lot of comments and said that it was fantastic and they learned a lot, and I did too. So thanks, Paul. Thanks, panel. Looking forward to next time I talk with you guys.